Everybody has their favorite Pokemon game. Whether you started out in the 90s or you're new to the franchise and you started out on the Switch, it doesn't matter. Everybody has a favorite Pokemon game. I'm the Jaws of Hoenn, and I'm here to rank every Pokemon game from worst to best. Keep in mind these are my opinions and what I think are the best and what I think are the worst, so don't take them too hard. Keep in mind I'm only doing the mainline games, so you're not going to see any spin-off games like Mystery Dungeon. Without further ado, let's get started. First up on my list is the original Red and Blue. Now these are the original games that got me started into Pokemon. They're the ones that started it all. And because of that, would I like to put them higher? Of course I would. But just come down to it, these games do not age well at all. I can have much love for these games, but trying to play them now, they are just really clunky and super glitchy, and obviously the graphics just do not hold up to today's standards. But like I said, much respect for these games. They are the ones that introduced me to Pokemon. The next game on my list is Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. Ah yes, another revisit to the original Red and Blue. Again. Now this game was obviously targeted more for people that had played Pokemon Go. The catching mechanic was horrible. I hated the motion control catching mechanic. That was one thing that really brought this game down a peg. But I will say I did enjoy being able to ride on Pokemon in this game. That was really cool. This game just seemed kind of unnecessary. It's not that I didn't enjoy the game, but if I'm gonna play a version of Gen 1, I'd rather just play Fire Red and Leaf Green. This game was obviously targeted for a younger audience who played Pokemon Go. The next game on my list, get ready YouTube commenters, I'm expecting a lot of backlash. Because the next game on my list is Pokemon Platinum. Now I've never played Pokemon Diamond or Pearl, I've only played Pokemon Platinum. Now obviously my opinion on Generation 4 is extremely unpopular, but Generation 4 is my least favorite generation of Pokemon. Because of all the slow text, and can I even get started on that slow HP bar? My god. And the game just kind of seemed to drag on. I did enjoy a lot of the Pokemon that was introduced in Generation 4. They gave me some of my favorite Pokemon. But as a whole, the game just kind of drags. I know that guy said that's super unpopular, but that's just how I feel about Pokemon Platinum. The next game on my list is Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Now remember how I told you that Pokemon Generation 4 is my least favorite of all the generations? Well, this game actually made me kind of tolerate Generation 4. Now again, I'm going to get a lot of backlash because people are like, how could you put Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl above Platinum? That's blasphemy. Well, for me, like I said, did not really enjoy Platinum, but this game at least fixed some of the problems with Platinum. For one, they fixed the HP bar situation I was talking about in Platinum. That was a humongous plus. Pokemon sort of follow you. I mean, they do follow you, not great, like they do in like the DLC for Sword and Shield, but they do follow you in Diamond and Pearl. They got rid of HMs and more TMs. That was pretty awesome that they did that. They expanded on the underground, made it a lot bigger and better, and you can find more Pokemon. And yes, let's address the elephant in the room. Everybody hated the chibi look for the new Pokemon of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I didn't mind it. It didn't affect me anyway. It's supposed to be more like the originals. They were trying to make it like aesthetically look like the originals, but in like a bubbly form. It didn't turn out the best, but it didn't deserve all the hatred it got. It was fine. Honestly, I probably will never go back to playing a Generation 4 Pokemon game because like I said, I just don't enjoy that generation. But if I do, I will go back to this game. I would rather go back to this game than play Platinum. Haters come at me. The next game on my list is Pokemon Sword and Shield. Now this is probably the game I spent the most time playing overall in Pokemon. The wild area though, I will say made you a little overpowered. One of the biggest perks of this game was I really loved the DLC. It made the game so much better. The Pokédex was massive, especially after they added the DLC. The Pokédex just expanded exponentially. The story was kind of boring, but I didn't hate it. I mean, the story itself was just a general Pokemon story. Now we can all agree though that Hop was a really dumb rival. Come on, Hoppa's terrible. And the Gigamax and Dynamax mechanic, I did not enjoy that very much. I would say it's probably my least favorite of the, quote, gimmicks that they've tried over the years. But as a whole, I absolutely enjoyed playing this game over and over and over again, mostly because of how massive the Pokédex is, and it's extremely easily replayable, and that's why I like this game. The next game on my list is Fire Red and Leaf Green. Now, Fire Red and Leaf Green are obviously the very first remake of Gen 1 that they did, and it's honestly, in my opinion, the best way to play Generation 1. Some of the things they changed from the original game to the new updated remake was they introduced Steel and Dark types into Generation 1. You can also catch some Gen 2 Pokemon in Fire Red and Leaf Green versus the original, which was obviously the only 151 Pokemon. They also added the Versus Seeker, which allowed players to battle in-game trainers just over and over and over again. They also introduced the Fame Checker, which displays information of the characters in the game. Another thing that they added into the remakes was the list of TMs and HMs have been upgraded to be compatible with Ruby and Sapphire. Just in general, this is the best way to play Kanto Pokemon Generation 1. I just think that this is pretty much one of the best remakes they've ever done. Pokemon Yellow is extremely nostalgic to me. A lot of it has to do with because this game is stuck so closely to the TV show more than focusing on the games. I grew up watching the TV show. It's what got me started in Pokemon. It was what piqued my interest in the franchise as a whole. And of course, when Red and Blue came out, Red and Blue was great. But when Pokemon Yellow came out, it really got me hooked onto the video games because, like I said, it was stuck more to the show. You get to have Pikachu as your partner. You can have all three starters as an option to get throughout the game. And I just had more fun with it. And for all those people that didn't grow up in the 90s, this was one of the few games that had color. Red and Blue did not have color when it first came out. But I love this game. If I were to replay any original Kanto game, this is the one I'm playing. This has so much nostalgic for me. I love the fact that you can have Pikachu as your partner, and what can I say? I live in nostalgia. The next one on my list is the game Sun and Moon. They introduced some of my all-time favorite Pokemon are from Sun and Moon. I actually love the Pokemon they introduced in these games. It was definitely a new idea for Pokemon, adding in all the totems and getting rid of the gyms. It was definitely a strange game. I don't know if that would go towards the positive or the negative. It was definitely different though. One of the big things this game did versus all the other games was this is the first game that actually got rid of HMs, making it where your Pokemon could just use the HMs on their own and not have to be an HM slave anymore. And as I stated, Generation 7 added some of my very favorite Pokemon, but unfortunately though, the addition of these amazing Pokemon does not make up for the middle of the road game that this thing actually was. As I stated, one of the biggest negatives in my personal opinion was that I really did not like the totems. I didn't like the fact that they got rid of the gems for the totems. I don't think the totems worked very well. I will say Z moves weren't my favorite. They're not as bad as everybody makes them out to be, but they're not great. There are better gimmick mechanics later on that they introduce, but overall it's just an okay gimmick. I do gotta say that Team Skull is definitely my favorite team of all Pokemon. They're hilarious. Overall, this is just a pretty middle of the road Pokemon game. It's fun. I've replayed it before, but other than that, there's nothing super crazy awesome about this game. The next game on my list is Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. The sequel game to Sun and Moon basically is just Sun and Moon plus adding in a few extra things. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon added extra story, which was pretty cool. They added Fairy Trial Totem stickers. I mean, that's something, I guess. They did actually add an expansive post-game and fighting where you get to fight familiar villains and stuff like that. That was pretty cool. I did like that. And of course, being a sequel game, they added more Pokemon available to catch. They expanded the Pokédex so you could catch more Pokemon. The only reason this is higher than the original Sun and Moon is because this is literally Sun and Moon, just with a few extra things added in. As I stated, it's Sun and Moon Plus. That's basically it. Next game on my list is Pokemon X and Y. Now I know a lot of fans give this game a bad rep, saying it's a pretty mid game, but I don't think so. This game was our first big introduction to 3D Pokemon for handheld devices. Pokemon X and Y added a ton of amazing Pokemon that I absolutely love, and they introduced my favorite, quote, gimmick that Pokemon's ever done, and that is Mega Evolutions. Megas were the best. It was also when they introduced the Fairy typing and changed a lot of old Pokemon into Fairy type Pokemon, which I absolutely loved. I always thought that dragons were extremely overpowered, even though they were still awesome. They were extremely overpowered and they needed something more than just ice as a weakness, and that's when Fairy typing came in. As great as this game was, there are one big negative to this game, and I know a lot of people say it is easy. The game is not a hard game, and the fact that the rivals were horrible. Tierno, Shauna, and Trevor, some of the worst rivals that Pokemon's ever put into a game. But overall, the reason it's so high on my list is because of the additions to all the Pokemon that I love out of Generation 6 and the inclusion of Megas. I'm so happy that they're finally back. I can't wait to play the new game with Megas again. Next game on my list is the newest Pokemon game, and that is Scarlet and Violet. Now, Scarlet and Violet has been overall pretty popular with the most of the Pokemon community. We've all kind of agreed that this is a pretty good game. I think the open world worked really well, and that's kind of what fans were hoping for, was a good flowing open world, and I feel like they gave that to us. Another big perk for me personally, at least, was I really enjoyed the story of this game. The story seemed much darker than some of the past Pokemon games, and it had just a really good tone to it. Like the story itself was honestly pretty dang good compared to other Pokemon games. And the new gimmick of terrestrializing your Pokemon was actually pretty cool. Not as cool as some of the other ones, but it wasn't terrible. I mean, I like the fact that I could change my Pokemon's typing. That helped out for raids. But yeah, it was a pretty decent little gimmick that they added into this game. I love the fact that there was 3 different branches of stories that you could go to. Some were much better than others, but overall, I enjoyed the collective of all the stories. But with every good game, there are negatives to it as well, and the biggest one is, we all know it's coming for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, are some of the glitches. They're notorious for this game to have a lot of glitches. And I even experienced some glitches when I played through it as well. When I played Pokemon Scarlet for the first time, there was an incident where my entire game broke, basically. I went into a cavern and everything glitched out and I had to restart from my last save. That was a huge bummer. But overall, I think this was a good stepping stone for open world Pokemon games. I think this is a good base. I think that this is a good way for us to see what the future of Pokemon could be. And this game could be the good base of that. We could obviously build upon it and make it cleaner and better as future Pokemon games come out. The next game on my list is Pokemon Emerald. Now, Pokemon Emerald was my very first introduction to Generation 3. I had never played Pokemon Ruby or Sapphire. I do know that those games are very popular, but I know Emerald is the most popular. When I first experienced Emerald, I had a great time. Like I said, never played Ruby and Sapphire, so I went in completely blind and got introduced to some of the great Pokemon. They had great starters. Sceptile is one of the best. Mudkip is extremely popular as well. And I'm not a big fan of Blaziken, but that's just me. And as I said, I didn't play Ruby and Sapphire, but I do know that Emerald added a bunch of different stuff. They added a brand new storyline, including 3 legendary Pokemon, which included Rayquaza, obviously. And they expanded the Pokedex to add in a bunch of Pokemon that weren't in Ruby and Sapphire. And Emerald added Battled Frontier, which was obviously once you became the champion, you could battle a bunch of trainers and earn battle points, which you could use to purchase, Pokemon attacks, decorations, and more for your base and stuff. You could also rematch the gym leaders. Once you defeat them and become champion, you could battle gym leaders again to keep getting experience and keep experiencing those battles and stronger opponents. Just overall, I think Emerald was a very fun game, and I could have asked for a better introduction to Generation 3, because after playing Emerald, I don't really have a reason to go back to Ruby and Sapphire when I have the best version of it right there. Next game on my list is Pokemon Legends Arceus. This is one of the newer games that they just recently came out with, and I really enjoyed this game. I had absolute blast playing this game. It was a new style of Pokemon, brand new, and I think it turned out pretty well. It was free roaming for the most part, not like Scarlet and Violet free roaming, but it was a stepping stone towards that direction. One of the big perks of this game was the story was awesome. It was set in like past Sinnoh, before the whole Pokemon League and trainers and all that stuff. It was setting up the precedent of like what trainers are going to be. Pokeballs were brand spanking new. The whole "You Are the Chosen One" by Arceus, I thought the whole thing was really cool. Another thing this game added were the new introductions to alphas. They were like bigger versions of Pokemon. Not like Dynamaxing, but they were just like a big like version of them. Alphas were super cool. It was like something different for once. Instead of it having some crazy gimmick, it was just making them bigger. It was, I don't know, I just thought it was awesome. And you know, at the end of the game, I had a full team of alphas. I love the fact that boss battles were actually pretty challenging. The noble Pokemon battles were actually pretty fun. Plus, man, that Arceus fight, if you finish the game, you know what I'm talking about. And that final battle at the end of the game is on par with fighting Cynthia, with how crazy hard it can be, especially if you're not prepared. Overall, this was a great idea that Pokemon did with the direction of gameplay they went with this game, and I'm really excited to get to play another Legends game with the upcoming Legends ZA. Next game on my list is the Pokemon game, Pokemon Silver, Gold, and Crystal. This was the Pokemon game I played the most growing up as a kid. This was the first time they added something other than the original 151 Pokemon, and I thought it was absolutely amazing as a kid. Plus, it also helped that the TV show was going on alongside with the Johto games as well, so I watched the show evolve with these new Pokemon, and I could catch the Pokemon from the show at the same time. This game had the best post-game in all of Pokemon. Best post-game. The fact that you could go back to Kanto and fight all of the original gym leaders after the main story of Johto was absolutely fantastic. I do wish they would have fixed the levels when you went to Kanto, because they basically started out as a low-level Pokemon. That didn't make any sense to me, but overall it was awesome. And the fact that you get to fight Red. You basically get to fight a version of yourself from the original Red and Blue, and it was the best epic boss fight ever. Plus, if you played Crystal, it was the first time you could play as a female in the Pokemon franchise. The main reason this is high on my list is purely nostalgia. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. I have so many great memories of playing this game as a kid that it has to be this high on my list. Now we move on to my favorite way of playing Generation 3, and that is Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I think this is the definitive best version of playing Generation 3. I know most people would say Emerald, but I prefer this version better. The reason why I would say I like Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire more than Emerald is because each one of them had their own specific things. Emerald didn't introduce the Battle Frontier, but Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire added the Delta episode, and one of the biggest perks to this, why I like it more than Emerald, is it added in the Mega Evolutions from X and Y. And they also had primal versions of Groudon and Kyogre. The biggest thing, though, was adding the Megas. I freaking love the Megas that they added in Generation 6, and then they brought that into a Hoenn Generation 3 game. I thought that was amazing. That's why this game is really high up on my list. Another big perk for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire was that the National Dex was available much earlier than Emerald was. And another minor thing, it's not a big deal, but they added fairy types in this game, because obviously fairy types didn't exist in Emerald, but now it does in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Just overall, there is always a big rivalry between these two games, I feel like, between the Pokemon community, Emerald versus Oraz. I prefer Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but that is just my personal opinion. The next game on my list is Pokemon Black and White. Pokemon Black and White was an awesome story. It had the best story of all Pokemon. For once, this game decided to make it where instead of it being just you're the good guys, they're the bad guys, it made you question the bad guys' choices. Like, a great example is N. N wanted to free Pokemon. He thought that they should not be slaves of the Pokeballs. So his quote-unquote bad guy stuff was just trying to liberate Pokemon from their trainers. I know they still went about it in a bad way, but he was trying to free basically slavery. And this is the first time Pokemon made you question, it's like, what is what you're doing right? I don't know. The only negatives I can even think of is that it had a limited Pokedex. This was one of the times where Pokemon decided that you couldn't reuse any old Pokemon, and it's going to be brand new Pokemon only on the Pokedex, and that's all you could capture, which was kind of a mixed feelings for a lot of the fans. But overall, this was a fantastic addition to the Pokemon series, and like I said, I would personally say out of all the Pokemon games, the Black and White series had the best storyline. Next game on my list is Pokemon Black and White 2. The amazing story continues from the first game. I would say that this game's story is on par with the first game. Black and White 2, I love the fact that it's a direct sequel and we can see what happened after the events within at the end of the first game and see how Team Plasma has changed in the last 2 years. I loved the sprites in this game. I think this game had the best Pokemon sprites in the entire series actually. One thing that Black and White 2 did differently than the first game was that it added more Pokemon to the Pokedex, so it made your team be able to be more diverse to fit your needs compared to the first game. And just like with Black and White 2 also had the best music in all of Pokemon in my opinion. I think Generation 5 had the best soundtrack of all Pokemon. Just overall, this was a better predecessor to Black and White, only solely because of the gameplay was a little different. They added more stuff. They made it where it's a direct sequel. They made it where you could just continue the story of the first game with a new protagonist. Black and White 2 were so close on how great they are. They're pretty much equal, but the only reason this was a little higher is because they added more stuff. My number one spot for my very favorite Pokemon game is Heart Gold and Soul Silver. This is the best remake of any Pokemon game. They took my favorite Pokemon game and updated it at the time with quote modern graphics and features and just made it better. It came out during Generation 4, so they added a bunch of more Pokemon that you could catch from all the generations prior. You could connect this game with Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, and it allowed further accessibility to many species of Pokemon that were available at the time, as well as opportunities for more competitive play against a variety of teams. Plus, your Pokemon could follow you in this game. It was such a cool feature back in the day. This was like not heard of back then. I do wish that this game would get the Legends Arceus treatment. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but I think that would be really cool if they added that little feature into future Pokemon games. There was just so many things that were added to an already amazing game, and that is why this is my favorite Pokemon game. Well, there you have it. There is my ranking of every Pokemon game from worst to best. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe while you're here on the channel. Comment below your favorite Pokemon game so we can have a discussion on which one's the best. And I'll see you guys in the next video.